Our next speaker is a truly brilliant man. We were talking before about unifying theories in physics and how important they are for the program of using modern science to prepare the world for Mashiach. Seeing unification in the world is a preparation for seeing the absolute unity of Hashem in Yemos HaMashiach. Well, our next speaker, Dr. Yonatan Bentwich, has developed a whole new theory of physics. Now, you're all familiar with probably the classic Einstein's attempt to find a unified field theory, and it was not that successful, but ever since then, the scientific community has been looking for unified theories in physics with more intensity and at a faster pace. String theory is another one, which is come pretty close, and who knows, it may be the one. What I can tell you about it is in the Sikha of Parshas Noach, Rebbe Melech HaMashiach gives some detail as to what a unified theory in physics would be. Now, the fact that there is a minimum number of elements and only 4 fundamentally different forces is itself a pretty strong unification, but that goes back to the 1800s or early 1900s. The ultimate unified theory in physics, the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach says, is one which would have one fundamental notion of particle and one fundamental notion of force. So there would basically be one physical element and one physical force, and everything else would be built up from that, would be a combination of those particles and those forces. Well, we're working on it. What Dr. Bentwich has come up with, he calls computational unified field theory, CUFT, computational unified field theory. This has become very popular among the scientists looking for new theories. It's not yet mainstream physics by any means, but he has written and published a lot on it, a couple of books, brochures, videos, and
Hello, my name is Dr. Yonatan Bentwich, and I am here to speak to you about my theory, the computational unified field theory, and how it relates to the fight today against the COVID, and it does relate to the general theme of the conference, of this year's conference, which is for humanity to unite behind this fight against the COVID-19 and find the harmony, the peace, the achdut of humanity, rather than continue the old ways of fighting and galus. And all these wonderful conferences that Professor Silman is organizing, the Rial Institute, come to show more and more every year that we are living in a time of Geula, and that this Geula, cutting swords into plows, this Geula is signified by a growing understanding of humanity worldwide, that we must unite, that there is a purpose and tachlis, a goal and a mission and end to this whole universe and to our human existence. The Rabbi Melech HaMashiach spoke many times about the importance of conveying to the world that we live in a time of Geula. That all that we need to do is open our eyes and see that we live in Geula, and the importance of conveying to all the world, non-Jews as well, the importance of 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, 7 Noach commandments. This is actually a good place to start, because obviously from wherever this COVID-19 virus erupted, whether it was from a bat or from other sources, it is also clear that the observance of the Jewish laws and wisdom goes a long, long way. Not eating basar min achai, keeping those 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. And one of the things that are very exciting, and you may say also by Hashgacha Pratit, is that the eruption of this terrible virus coincides with a shift in science, a shift in the world from the old 20th century material causal paradigm of relativity theory and quantum mechanics, and in a way it also coincided with our old ways of looking at the world. It coincides with what the Rebbe is all the time telling us, to open our eyes and see the Geula and live the Geula. And I'll explain why I say that. You may say that the crisis, the cultural crisis that we go through associated with this COVID-19 virus has to do with the fact that we have been accustomed to think that the world is material. We've been accustomed to think that our pleasures, our existence, our security is all material. And so when the world comes to a halt, so to speak, when money cannot buy us life, when medicine, at least for the time being, cannot save us from this virus, when planes are halted, when businesses are halted, when people are confined to their homes and to their computer or TV screen, this is shocking. And it's shocking primarily because, in a sense, the culture, the Western culture, is not yet understood that the real existence of the world is not material. It's actually spiritual. This theory that I discovered over the last 7 to 10 years, called the computational unified field theory, follows the great quest of Einstein, considered to be one of the 2 greatest scientists the world has ever known, Jewish, of course. Albert Einstein was the one who started a quest 100 years ago to unify between relativity theory, which he discovered single-handedly. In brackets, it's considered to be the greatest intellectual achievement of one human being, and quantum mechanics, which he also begun, and then other scientists joined him. And Einstein didn't like the outcome. He said that quantum mechanics is not wrong, but it is rather incomplete. And he was searching for 30 years to find this unifying field theory that could unify quantum mechanics and relativity theory. He said God does not play dice, and he meant that the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics, as if the universe is governed at the microscopic level by chance events, not guided by God, not guided by a higher intelligence or hand, so to speak. That conception is incomplete and would have to be modified. So what Einstein was doing, he was looking for a theory. He called it a unifying field theory. He was looking for a theory that could unify quantum mechanics and relativity theory. And very interesting, the Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach, had a long relationship with one of his Hasidim, Professor Velvel Green, and which became a Chassid, a follower of the Rebbe. And there was a book coming out a few years ago about the 22 years of their correspondence. And in one of the letters, the Rebbe alluded to this attempt of Einstein to unify all the forces in the universe in a single equation. And he said that it's clear that such an equation that would unify all the forces of nature in one equation, that will be accomplished. But he also said that according to our Jewish faith, monotheistic Jewish faith, we also know that such an equation not only would unify all the forces, but it would also have to point at the existence of the Shem, of Hashgacha, that everything is produced and guided by the Shem. And I'm mentioning that because at the center of my theory, the computational unified field theory, I call that theory in respect of Einstein's quest. For 30 years, he single-handedly worked at finding this unifying field theory. And some say that even on his deathbed, he was scribbling equations, trying to find that one equation that would point at a unification of all forces and also the existence of God. And so and many scientists ridiculed Einstein that he was going down a dead alley, but I think that they've all proven wrong. This theory is a fulfillment of Einstein's quest, therefore I call it the computational unified field theory. And this theory essentially, at the center of this theory, there is what I call the universal computational formula, which essentially does unify space-time, energy, and mass, all as derivations, or are all produced by this singular higher-ordered universal consciousness or computational principle. By providence, by Ashgacha Pratit, I signified that higher force by the Hebrew letter Yud, but that Yud, that universal consciousness principle, produces, according to this theory, everything in the universe many, many billions of times per second. Imagine, I give a cinematic film metaphor. This, by the way, is all illustrated in the new book that's coming out in the US, published by iUniverse.com. And that book is called God's Physics, supposed to come out over the next few months. So that in that God Physics books, I also mention this universal computational formula, and I also mention a cinematic film metaphor. I give a metaphor that helps us to understand or conceive a little bit how this can really happen. So I say, in the same way that you can imagine in a film, you can imagine a jet plane flying through the screen, and it seems to you that jet plane has a tremendous velocity, energy, but if you slow down and stop the frames, you would see that the airplane or the jet is just displaced from one frame to another, and that gives us the illusion that jet plane has an energy. And in the same manner, with this cinematic film metaphor, I explain that this universal consciousness principle remembers, produces, computes everything in the universe. So it computes for every small pixel, for every human being, for every cell, for every gene, for every bird, for every plant, for every rock, for everything in the universe, every plant. Everything in the universe is being computed many billions of times per second, and that computation gives us the sense of time and energy and mass and space. Maybe I'll mention here that in the same way that Einstein had to prove that his theory is an enlargement or an expansion and is actually more valid than the old model, the Newtonian mechanics which preceded him, he had to look for an experiment that would actually prove that his theory is much more valid. It includes, by the way, Newtonian mechanics. Newtonian mechanics becomes a special case in Einstein's relativity theory. But still, at the time, he had to prove that his theory is more valid and more expansive than Newtonian mechanics. And he did that by calling scientists and astronomers to make an observation just 100 years ago, or just above 100 years ago in 1919. He called astronomers to make an observation around the solar eclipse and to find out what would be the curvature of Mercury's pathway around the sun. According to his theory, because mass is supposed to curve space-time, Mercury's perihelion pathway was curved twice more, or more curved twice the value of Newtonian, predicted according to Newtonian mechanics. And I'm mentioning this because we stand at a crossroad, a leap, a shift, a revolution in physics, much the same way that Einstein revolutionized physics 100 years ago. We stand at this revolution, shift from the old material causal paradigm, relativity theory and quantum mechanics, to the new paradigm of the computational unified field theory. This new theory revolutionized our whole understanding of the universe. The universe is no longer assumed to have been produced by a Big Bang nuclear explosion. The universe does not expand by a non-existent dark energy, dark matter. I'll talk about it in a second. But the universe is actually being produced and reproduced, remembered and dissolved and recreated and evolved many billions of times per second by this singular universal consciousness principle. In Jewish Hasidic terms, we would say this is the Koach of the Shem. Maybe I'll mention again something from the Chassidut. The Alter Rebbe, Admor Zaken, talks about the way in which every Jew can reach reverence and love towards the Shem, Ir'ah ve'ava. And he says that the way to do that is by looking at Gedlut Hashem, looking at the magnanimity, at the infinitude, at the wisdom, at the infinite understanding and wisdom of the Shem, and infinite complexity and goodness of the Shem. This brings us towards reverence and towards love, towards the Shem. And I give an example in many of my lectures which conveys a little bit of a sense of the same feeling, the same idea, which relates to my feeling, and I share that with many other people, of this reverence. Imagine that you sit in a Beis Midrash, in synagogue or in Beis Midrash, where you study hundreds, thousands of books that are placed all over this Beis Midrash. And I ask you to close your eyes and imagine the names of all the books in the Beis Midrash. And of course, you cannot imagine the names, all the names of the Bet Midrash, of the books on the shelves of the Bet Midrash. And if I asked you to imagine all the letters in the books, this would be superhuman. You cannot do that. Now imagine that the Shem has to remember, and not imagine, but really remember, produce, dissolve, reproduce, and grow every tiny cell in our body, every speck of hair, every worm, every cell, every gene, every human being, every plant, every planet, every rock, every tree, every bird, every butterfly, many, many billions of times simultaneously across the whole universe. Is unfathomable. And that's where this theory is going towards. So first, let's bring in the COVID-19 and what it does to the world and why it's so disturbing to the world, and why, in a sense, it's also by Hashgacha Pratit. The COVID-19 made the world stop. And it made the world stop because it, in a sense, it embodies this old material causal paradigm, which is coming to an end, or being upgraded and expanded into this much higher and more expansive new model and understanding of the world. It's really a model that is a model of Geula. This new computational field theory is almost synonymous with the process of Geula, because the old model, the material causal model, said everything in the universe happens just by chance, happens by cause and effect. There is a virus, it attacks the body. Maybe this virus was a mutation of another virus, and the immune system is not used to it, and therefore it just harms people and endangers people's lives. But according to this new understanding, nothing happens by chance. First, let's talk about how this new model, new understanding, revises all of our understanding of the universe. Because this singular universal consciousness principle computes every pixel in the universe simultaneously, there cannot be any cause and effect across the universe. So the very basic assumption in science, in material causal science, that A produces B, that the universe expands by matter curving space directing matter, is just invalid. It cannot exist. The idea that the universe was created by a Big Bang nuclear explosion cannot exist. Why? Because every frame, from the first frame in the universe, if there existed such a frame, of course there existed by Bereshit bara Hashem Hashamayim va'aretz, but in the first frame, let's say from the old material causal paradigm, that there was a Big Bang, according even to that model, there couldn't be really a cause and effect, a Big Bang, because at every frame, all the pixels are presented simultaneously. I give a metaphor, another metaphor. They say about King Solomon that used up to 3,000 metaphors to explain different things, and he's considered to be the wisest of men. I use a few metaphors just to explain things in this theory. And so I say, imagine that you had a glass jar and a hammer, and this hammer seems to be hitting the glass jar, and the glass jar breaks and the water spills over the table. Now, in the old model, if you'd ask a person, a viewer, what caused the spillage of the water, what caused the breakage of the cup or the glass jar, you'd say it was the hammer. But when you slow down the progression of the film, you see that In the first frame, they appear in this way, and then closer, and then touching each other, and then this lies down. But in each of these frames, there is no cause and effect, because the hammer and the glass jar are presented simultaneously. It doesn't matter in what proximity, they're always presented in each frame simultaneously, so there cannot be a cause and effect. Between the frames, both dissolve, actually the whole universe dissolves back into this universal consciousness. Amazing, by the way, that many of these concepts are so similar to knowledge, wisdom that exists in Judaism and Hasidic thought for thousands of years. The idea that there is Ratzo and Shov, that the Shem is producing the whole universe and dissolving it back into the Shem. The Baal Shem Tov that says that everything happens not by chance but by providence. Everything is equivalent in this theory, but it's obviously scientific. So we cannot have had a Big Bang producing the universe. In a sense, the universe is being dissolved and reproduced every split second. The universe actually, according to this new theory, doesn't exist as an independent entity. There is a principle in this theory which I called the computational invariance principle, which actually says that the only thing that remains all the time there and does not change and is real is this universal consciousness principle. We know Bereshit bara Hashem shamayim v'aretz. There is reality, obviously, to the universe, but it exists only as an embodiment, and it's being computed and being sustained by this universal consciousness principle. The same way that Admor Zaken talks about the Aseret HaMa'amorot, the 10 sayings of Ma'amorot of the Shem, that keep the whole universe enlivened all the time, from Ayin to Yesh. The same idea appears in this theory, that the whole universe exists and is being reproduced many billions of times per second. So this new model essentially takes humanity from a place where we assume that everything is mechanical, everything is material. I think that towards a new place which we understand that everything exists by the grace of Hashem, that everything is being produced by Hashgacha Pratit, by providence, that nothing happens by chance. When we spoke about or speak about when in the old model, material causal model, spoke about Darwin's theory of evolution, as if, again, like in the Big Bang model, where the whole universe was created by chance, by a nuclear explosion, and it expands ad infinitum and will die. The suns will die, the galaxies will die, human beings will die, God forbid. Nothing is guided, everything is by chance, everything is just material. The same way evolution talks about the idea that the whole creation of the life on Earth is created, in a sense, just by chance. Genetic mutations, interactions, physical interactions between organisms and a challenging environment, the survival of the fittest. This whole conception of the old material causal paradigm is very depressing because there is no tachlis, there is no goal, there is no direction, there is no directing hand. Everything happens by chance, and nothing is predicted, nothing is known, nothing is directed. It's obviously not the way it is, but this new model talks about a completely different scenario. And it talks about the fact that the universe has been created and is created continuously by this universal consciousness principle. It talks the same, it really goes very close to what the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach said. He's saying that we have to open our eyes and see the Geula, that it is here. And how we can see that is by realizing that everything that happens around us is happening by providence. So this theory, the first time in science, that the ideas of a goal, a direction for the whole universe evolution. Let me perhaps mention a few ideas there. For example, the idea about instead of the old paradigm saying that the universe expands but based on a non-existent dark matter, dark energy, which pushed the universe to expand ad infinitum. Instead of that, first of all, this new theory, new model, talks about the fact that there's no dark matter, dark energy. Again, in brackets, I mentioned Einstein's revolution 100 years ago when he discarded the existence of the ether. At that time, people thought that there exists an ether, a fine substance that pervades the whole universe. and nobody could detect the existence of the ether. So Einstein was very bold, and he said that he postulated that if you cannot observe it, it doesn't exist, for sure in scientific thought. So he discarded the existence of the ether. And then he produced this new beautiful model of relativity theory, but that again has to be more expanded or more expensive. In the same way today, this assumption that there exists, today science assumes that there exists dark energy, dark matter, that constitute up to 95% of all the matter and energy in the universe. And that's the only way that scientists can explain the evolution or the accelerated expansion evolution of the universe. And what we find in this new model, similar to what Einstein did, since scientists and astronomers have been trying to detect the dark energy and dark matter for decades, and no clear, direct evidence or proof for the existence of dark matter, dark energy has been found. And so in one of the 30 plus articles that I've written, and books and chapters and conferences that I've lectured in one of those articles I've postulated the dark matter and dark energy are superfluous, do not exist. So instead of this dark energy, dark matter, instead of Big Bang nuclear explosion, which are all random and are all mechanical, or all material and causal, the new model talks about the singular higher order universal consciousness principle, or Koach Hashem, which in a sense produces the whole universe every frame, many billions of times per second. Again, it remembers and cares for and has personal providence, Hashgacha Pratit, for every small atom, for every small worm, for every human being, for every ant, for every creature. And it remembers and produces and reproduces it. In fact, this new theory is the first time, or it's the first instance in science, and very close to what Geula is that we see that Geula is here. It's the first time that science recognizes the importance of morality. And this actually is very tied to what we're seeing with the COVID-19. When the UN now calls for humanity to unite, to cease war, to unite in our battle against the COVID-19, this is just a manifestation of Geula. And in this new theory, morality becomes a key cornerstone of science. I give in the God's Physics book a small story, small metaphor, a story and a metaphor about this morality principle, which becomes a key principle, a key cornerstone in 21st century physics and science. And the morality principle, I give I give a story of a CEO running driving actually in their fancy car to an important meeting, annual meeting. They have about an hour to reach that meeting. They're leaving their nice home in the hills, and they're driving in a curvy road to reach that critical or crucial meeting, in which they're supposed to be advanced and offered great financial remuneration for their achievements over the last year or so. And lo and behold, on this curvy road, they find an accident, and they find some injured human beings. And they have a choice. That CEO has a choice. He or she can either do the right moral action, and they know that help or ambulance may not reach that injured person in time. So they can pick the human person and put them in their car, stamp their nice leather coating, and rush to the Bet Refuah, to the hospital, and save their life, Bezrat Hashem. Or they can, but they will miss obviously their meeting, and they may lose some promotion. Or they may turn their gaze the other way, make a U-turn, maybe against the law, and find a different route to reach their desired meeting. The idea, though, is that according to this new moral principle, the choice of a human being, of each of us, and for sure of all of us Jews, our choice, our free choice to make the right moral action is critical, because the idea is that you have multiple futures, multiple possible futures for each human being. Again, by the way, and the selection of that the single future, according from the various multiple possible futures, according to the moral choice of each of us at any point in time. Just it also again turns our mind to understand the magnanimity and the ensof, the infinitude of Hashem. Imagine how the Hashem sees and computes and knows the past, the present, and the multiple futures, and the actual future that is selected for each human being from the 7 or 8 billion human beings on the planet. Inconceivable, and they're all interconnected. We're all interconnected. In that sense, by the way, the eruption of the COVID-19 virus, I think, is also by personal providence. We all pray and are actually working on together finding a cure and a vaccination for the COVID-19, including ourselves. But the eruption of this virus, in a sense, also shows us the moral principle. It unites all of us in the battle against this virus. I give a metaphor. Imagine a trampoline, and imagine that you have like an iron bar connecting between 2 points in this trampoline. I explain in this new theory, as Hasidus does for thousands of years, that we're all connected. We're all part of the Shem. And that our choice. So I give a metaphor that if there's a metal bar or iron bar connecting between 2 points in this trampoline, and one point pushes the iron bar to inflict pain, God forbid, on the another point. So these are two human beings or two Jews which have free choice. So when that one individual inflicts pain or actually helps another human being, it goes back. There is a balancing tendency, a balancing characteristic. The Shem in Geula and always is progressing humanity towards Geula, towards a point where we will see. We speak about the Geula, Ve'ra'u kol basar ki pi Hashem diber, that all human beings will open their eyes and will see that God is actually creating the world, that the world is moral, that the world is purposeful. The Rabbi Melech HaMashiach spoke about living in the Geula, which means that we have to open our eyes and respect everything in creation and teach everybody about 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, about the importance of the morality principle. And so the COVID-19 virus teaches humanity that we're all one. And on the way, of course, respecting 7 Noach commandments and understanding, like in this new theory, that the morality principle, the moral principle, is key in our world. Let me speak about a few other things that we are now understanding about through this new theory and living in this Geula. So according to this new theory, the whole evolution of the universe is not by chance. It has not been created by a Big Bang. It's not being evolved by dark matter, dark energy. The contrary. The evolution, the creation of the universe is continuous. The Shem does not leave this universe for a split second. It embodies it. It cares for it. It remembers and produces and evolves. And actually, the whole program, so to speak, of the evolution of the universe, as of the evolution and the history and the future of every individual, is all cared for by the Shem. So you may say that there's 2 major forces that are driving the universe and our human life. One is a general trend, and we speak about, instead of evolution, talking about random mutations and random physical interactions, no direction, no goal. Actually, the jungle law, where the survival of the fittest is the rule. And this new approach is completely opposite. It talks about the fact that the Shem, or this universal consciousness principle, evolves the whole universe from inanimate matter, dumem, tzomeach, chai, medaber, navi, geula, from the inanimate rock or atom to animate plants, animals, human beings, nevuah, prophecy, and geula. Geula is for everybody. So the whole progression and evolution of the universe is something that is not by chance. The contrary, it has a plan. It's all planned out. There's a new understanding in this theory, quite amazing, where the Shem, or this universal consciousness principle, actually computes. It's called the reverse time goal hypothesis, and it essentially says that everything is been computed, has been and is being computed towards and from actually the perspective of Geula. The whole universe, in the same way that we speak in Chassidut and Judaism, that the whole world was created for the Jewish people and was created for Geula, for towards the state of Geula, Matan Torah, and eventually Geula. The same way in this theory, the whole universe was created from the beginning, from the end to the beginning. From Geula, it's now, in a sense, being planned towards Geula. It's all coming from Geula and going towards Geula. We, of course, live from the past to the present to the future, but from this higher ordered Shem's perspective, universal consciousness perspective, it may be actually reversed, that it's all from Geula, being planned and computed and drawn towards Geula. The whole progression is towards Geula. So we can see this, that the universal consciousness principle has been guiding and evolving the universe from Domem, Tzomeach, Chaim, Medaber, Nevuah, Geula, inanimate, animate, animal, plant, human being, prophets, Geula. This is the whole progression. That's on the, let's say, on the macroscopic scale of biological evolution and physics evolution. By the way, one of the things that on the personal scale, which is becoming more and more relevant, even, by the way, relating to our challenging overcoming of this pandemic, and because the private scale, the personal scale, talks about, again, the Shem, the universal consciousness principle, is with us all the time. It's with every human being. It encourages us to make moral choices. And the closer we get to Geula, we see, there's the famous saying, Ayin ro'ah, ozen shomat. There's an eye, so to speak, and an ear up in God's perspective that sees everything. Today we see, obviously, manifestations of this where a satellite guides all the GPS in the world, sees everything. We have cameras everywhere, everything is recorded, but that's obviously just an embodiment, as the Rabbi Melech HaMashiach said, a representation of what's happening with the Shem, of Hashgacha Pratit, of providence. So on the personal scale, which is very relevant for us now, people are confined many times, unfortunately, to their homes. We're much more, we keep social distancing, and it takes us to the point where we have to think more and more, why are we, what's our security in life? Who's guiding this whole universe? Do things happen by chance, or, as this new theory says, nothing happens by chance, and our moral choices make a lot of difference. Tefillah, tshuva, maasim, tzedakah, meshanim et Torah gzera. We know in Judaism that our prayer, our tzedakah, our maasim tuvim, they change our destiny. And this is, in a sense, the same idea, that the moral principle, when we become closer to the Shem, when we make moral deeds and tzedakah, when we make moral choices, we are changing our path and the world's path. The Rambam, the great Rambam, says that every Jew has to think and understand and act in this way, that he knows, or she knows, that every small action that we make can change our destiny and the whole world's destiny for better. That's what we have to do, and that's what we're doing. I have to mention here a few things that are exciting about this new theory and the Geula that we're living through. One of the things that Einstein, in science, when a new theory, a new paradigm has to pierce through and break through and change the world and expand our understanding, it usually gets to the point where we have to find an experiment that can actually prove that this new theory is better, is more expansive. It includes the older paradigm, but it's more expansive, it's more valid than the older one. Einstein did it when he did the 1919, he called cosmologists and astronomers all over the world to make to test one of his predictions that whereby the pathway of Mercury would be twice as curved around the sun as what Newton predicted, and Eddington's famous mission to Africa actually tested and triumphed Einstein's predictions, and overnight his theory became the accepted paradigm for 20th century physics until this time where the new paradigm is breaking through. And I'm mentioning that because the new paradigm talks about, again, an experiment or a few experiments that can actually prove that this theory is more valid, it's more expansive, and again, it includes relativity theory and quantum mechanics as special cases. And these experiments, I'd mentioned just two of them. One has to do, or I'll focus on one of them. One of them has to do with Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish Rosh Hashanah. We see that the universe is expanding, and we see that it's actually expanding at an accelerated rate. And again, I mentioned the fact that dark matter, dark energy are postulated just because science cannot explain right now, according to the old material causal paradigm, how come the universe expands at this accelerated rate. So we discarded dark energy, dark matter, and the new explanation is that the Shem, the universal consciousness principle, every time that it produces the universe as one frame, many billions of times per second, every time that it produces the whole universe as a frame, as a series of frames, it expands and it enlarges, it produces larger frames, it produces more planets and more pixels, etc. This happens most dramatically, according to this new prediction of the theory, it happens most dramatically around Rosh Hashanah. And it says that human consciousness, collective human consciousness, has an intimate connection with the Shem. The Jewish people have an intimate connection with the Shem. And it says that around the Jewish Rosh Hashanah, when all the Jews all over the world, all of us are praying and mamlichim, and are recognizing and seeing and acknowledging the Shem as our Melech, as our King. When we do that, around that time, in Chassidus, they speak about the fact that there's a new light coming to the world, and that this new light, which has never been present in the world, begins with the Rosh Hashanah. In this theory, something very similar, I speak about, and I call all cosmologists in the world, all astronomers and cosmologists in the world, to observe and to measure the rate at which the universe is expanding around the Jewish Rosh Hashanah. And the hypothesis is that they will see a leap. It's not continuous. So if there is a certain rate of accelerated expansion in this year, Tafshin Pei, the next year, Tafshin Pei Aleph, there will be an incremental jump, which is non-continuous, around Rosh Hashanah. After Rosh Hashanah or beginning Rosh Hashanah, there will be a jump, a real increase in the accelerated rate of expansion. And again, to the extent that this is measured, this cannot be explained by relativity theory or quantum mechanics, and it would indicate that the Jewish people connection to the Shem, the Shem that is actually reproducing the world many billions of times per second, is doing that in connection also with the Jewish people and the Jewish people prayer during Rosh Hashanah. This is very exciting. This is Geula times. We start seeing that the universe, even to the furthest regions of the universe, it is actually being affected by our Jewish prayer. Again, like the Rambam says, that a Jew has to look at himself and know that the world has been created for each one of us, and that our actions can make a real difference. And especially in this COVID-19 pandemic, we come back again and again. Instead of looking at the world as a dead material machine and things happening by chance, we look at it in a different way. We understand that the world is alive. We understand that the world is being created by this universal consciousness reality, by the Shem, that our moral actions are very important, and that we and the Jewish people are affecting in a very critical way the evolution of the universe. I think that towards the end of my talk, I want to summarize and say that this new paradigm this new paradigm revises and changes our whole approach to the universe and to science. Instead of thinking that the universe was created by random and that it was created just by material interactions, instead of that, we come to the point where we understand that the universe has not just been created at a certain point, it's being created and recreated many billions of times per second, that the universal consciousness reality that is producing the universe many billions of times per second has a purpose, has a tachlis, that it's geula, that we're getting more closer and closer to a point where humanity has to unite, where humanity has to acknowledge the fact that this universe was not created by chance, but it is actually being produced and governed and directed by the Shem, by this universal consciousness reality, that it has a goal. And the goal is, when we say in the Jewish prayer, Aleinu l'shabeach, and we say, Yakiru v'yidu kol yeshevet tevel ki lecha ticha chol berech tishava kol lashon. Bayom hahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad. We say that towards Geula, everybody will have to recognize the fact that there is one Shem, one reality, and that we are here for a tachlis. We are here to recognize, to thank, to have gratitude, to have ira, to have ahava, to have mitzvot, to have things that are, the Chassidus is saying that that the whole purpose of the creation of the universe is that the Shem wanted to have a presence and a dira, a place where he can actually be shown and seen and experienced and revered here in the lowest of all the sfirot. And in fact, it's very exciting because in this time, by the way, another experiment that I called for, which is an accelerators, is to see that even the atoms, even the furthest regions of the universe are all being produced, expanded, and guided by the Shem. And Bezrat Hashem, this kinus will hasten the appearance of Rabbi Melech HaMashiach, and that we will all see the Geula, we will all open our eyes and understand that the universe and the reality is really of the Shem, and that we have to fulfill our part. Each one of us has a special shlichus, which is unique, and as the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach says, every Jew, every action of prayer, of mitzvah, of helping another Jew can make this Geula be apparent. Take it from Yad Mamash.